All right. Well, I want to recap a little bit. Yesterday, for those of you who didn't, and many of you made yesterday's Saturday retreat intensive from 7:30 till noon, and we had a 45-minute teaching on uh, the wheel of life, and which I is another name for mandalas. You may be aware of the kind of Tibetan mandalas that the guys make with the Tibetan monks make with the sand, but that's just one form. It's so we spent 45 minutes of that. We sat for a couple times before that. Then we had that teaching. Then we sat for a couple more times, and then we had our ending kind of integral session the way we will today. But if I could sum up the 45 minutes in 7 words, that would give at least you guys who weren't there a sense of it. And then it's posted up on YouTube by my intrepid son, who's my web present, Jared. He's got it posted up. It's just called The Wheel of Life. And you can find it on YouTube if you want to get the full version. But these 7 words is what we were working on for 45 minutes. And this is a kind of core teaching right here that can save you, hopefully could save you if you go back to college, save you some money and 3 college credits. You won't have to take an epistemology course. Epistemology is to know how we know, and it's a study of how we know anything. And these 7 words are sort of the core of epistemology. And here they are. How you see is what you see. Let that sink in for a minute. How you see is what you see. Until I actually got my vision corrected, I never actually saw the basketball rim. I was shooting at an orange color patch. Improved my free throw percentage quite a bit. How you see is what you see. I mean, if you're looking through a magnifying glass, oh, this is interesting. I never looked at you guys this way. If you're looking for something really small, you can make it really large. So how you see is what you see. If you're looking through a telescope, you could see things far away. So this is what we were working on. And we were using the mandala, this four-sided sort of diamond-shaped object with a circle in the center of it. It goes around. If you ever heard about the difficulty of squaring the circle, well, a mandala does that because it is both a circle and a square. It has 4 points, and then it has a circle in the middle, and it goes clockwise. And the 4 points, it's a way to look at all life. It's a way to look at every moment. It's a way to look at your life. You're at one of these 4 points or somewhere in between every moment. Right now, you're somewhere in between these 4 points. And we used kind of Tibetan mandala with Aramaic word there. But basically, the 4 points are you're either in a point where you feel the fullness of life. As Rumi says, the world is too full to talk about. You're feeling the fullness. That's 1 point. Then you go around. You're going clockwise always. You go around to the next point, and that's when everything starts to fall apart. You might be in that place now in life, this fall apart place. And then if you keep going on the wheel, you go to the place of total emptiness. And we've all been there in that scary place. It's pretty scary until you understand that that's the doorway to come up to something, a new beginning of something new entirely. And that will develop into, again, the fullness. And so it goes around and around. We have fullness and emptiness on one straight line, and then we have really falling apart, coming together on the other line. And then falling apart and coming together is code for death and birth. So you really have fullness, death of something, complete emptiness, birth of something new, which turns into a new fullness. Round and round it goes. That's a totally different way to look at life. And it really helps you, especially when you're in the death, falling apart stage, and definitely helps you when you're in the emptiness stage. Well, there's much more on that, much more about what happens at that station where things fall apart. That's a key point for people in life, where you either, if you have that picture of, hey, this is leading to something, especially when you're in the emptiness thing, it's leading to something new in a total new flow. If you have that picture, if you have that way of seeing life, makes it a lot easier. And um, it's a vision that will help you live every day of your life. Well, anyway, catch that the whole talk, because we've given a much fuller treatment, but that's just a little recap. That's a little recap. And for you guys who actually were here yesterday, well, I had this, it's what life does for you. Pam and I just watched this new movie. It's called Don't Look Up. And you couldn't have gotten a better follow-up to it. So you guys who saw the Wheel of Life thing, you could watch this new movie, Don't Look Up. It's got Leo DiCaprio and Jennifer Lawrence and Meryl Streep. I'm not giving away anything. Meryl Streep plays the president of the United States, but she plays a female Donald Trump. That should be worth it enough right there. And basically an asteroid is coming to destroy the planet. And that's all I'm going to tell you. But what you go into is, it's sort of like a modern Jonathan Swift modest proposal, kind of biting satire on the culture we're living in and the crazy culture we're living in. And so enough said on that. It's worth your watch. And I watched it last night, and on my walk today and all morning, I was seeing more and more in it. So it's worth your attention, especially if you like putting contrasting visions together of how modern American Western postmodern culture looks, as opposed to how that wheel of fullness, death, emptiness, rebirth, fullness, death, emptiness, rebirth. And notice that the death and the birth are on one line, and the fullness and the emptiness are on another line. So you also, in all mandalas, you have the cross. And the cross is an archetypal symbol of integration. So if you can see all of that as meaningful, the brokenness held within the wholeness is the perfection. Perfection is not to be perfect, not to be whole and just be, got it all together. Perfection is actually to be able to hold all the pieces, the darkness and the light. You see, yin yang symbol is another. It's the Taoist mandala of life, you see. So how you see is what you see. Now, here's a way, especially for you guys who saw yesterday, to keep going with that teaching. I never ended a class in my life. There was never an end to the class. What's the point? Because there's no end to that circle, you see. So this is a way to keep going with this teaching from yesterday. Archimedes, who was, scientist, a kind of little Greek engineer, and he was like a couple hundred years before Christ. He's in the BC area of Greece. Archimedes said something interesting. He said, give me a lever and a place to stand, and I will move the world. Now we'll work with this a little bit today. Give me a lever and a place to stand, and I will move the world. And the world needs to be moved. Our culture needs to be moved. Our society needs to be moved. Our consciousness needs to be moved. These are all the world. And I've actually used this term physically. One time I was cutting a hickory tree with my chainsaw, and it pinched. And so my blade got stuck in it. It wouldn't move. So I got a smaller log, put it up close to the big hickory, and I have this long steel kind of bar that I keep handy for just these things. And I put it under the hickory, and I had that lever of the smaller round, and on the end of it, it's about 6 feet long, and I could move this huge tree, which I couldn't lift. 3 people couldn't lift it, but with a lever, I moved it up. The thing opened and pulled out the saw. Give me a lever and a place to stand, and I will move the world. So all of our work to put it in especially you guys who've been here for coming on the third year now, trying to, this is not about entertainment. That's one of the things you'll see in Don't Look Up, that we're living in an entertainment culture. I mean, I like to give a thought that keeps people, give a talk that keeps people awake and maybe opens them up to something, but it's not about entertainment. Sometimes it's very hard truth. But to have a place to stand, to have a contemplative life is that place to stand. It's a kind of stance. And it's not the kind of, to become a contemplative and to have a contemplative life doesn't mean you run away from the world at all. Doesn't mean like to be a hermit or whatever. No, you don't have to go to a monastery. It just means to be a little bit away from the world. And in a few minutes, when the talk's over, we'll move a little bit away from, well, we're already a little bit away from the world and just even the content of this meditation. But when we hit the bell and we actually start sitting in contemplation, we're moving away, really, we're moving away, a little bit away from the world. The Buddha said you're taking a little step back from the world. He called it take the step back. Jesus said in Matthew 6, he said, don't be babbling these prayers like these other guys. He says, go in your room, shut the door, and sit in silence. And that idea of taking a step back from the world, it's the same thing. That's what it means to be a contemplative, not out of the world. And you're doing it for the world. Remember, when you find a place to stand, you have a lever and a place to stand, you can move the world. And this world needs to be moved to survive, for human beings to survive. So this is about putting contemplation and action together, you see. Give me a lever, place to stand, and I will move the world. And so this practice is the lever. Practice of contemplation and meditation, and coming together in a community. This gives you a lot of leverage in this insane world. And notice how, especially the whole thing, we help one another in the third part. The community actually heals people. It's very interesting. Well, I'm going to read you a mandalic poem. Now, it's from one of my favorite books. It's a book of Rilke's poems that were, he called it his Book of Hours. And actually, it was only sort of discovered after he died, because he really never wrote about it. He didn't publish it. It was like his private kind of thing. He was going on a train into a Trans-Siberian Railroad to Russia. For some reason, the train broke down near a monastery, and he got out and had to spend some hours there, just soaking up the monastic silence. And that led to a stream of poems that came out in this book, which he never really ever published. He just used them for himself. They're very different from a lot of the stuff Rilke wrote. So here's the second one in this volume. And the graphic we had, the screensaver, talked about widening circles, and that's in the first line of this poem. So we were talking about seeing life as a continuous circle, an eternal circle. So Rumi or Rilke goes on. He says, I live my life in widening circles that reach out across the world. I may not complete this last one, but I give myself to it. I circle around God, around the primordial tower. I've been circling for thousands of years, and I still don't know. Am I a falcon, a storm, or a great song? You can pull up this poem, I love Google for this, just by putting in the first line. And actually, none of these poems had titles. And so that you're known by its first line. I live my life in widening circles that reach out across the world. I may not complete this last one, but I give myself to it. I circle around God, around the primordial tower. I've been circling for thousands of years, and I still don't know. Am I a falcon, a storm, or a great song? That's just 8 lines. Uh, but I think it'll give us leverage here on our own journey. And, you know, it's definitely to try to explain poems, but we can look at it and notice certain things. And then, you know, I've been reading this poem for years, and I still see more in it all the time. But just I want you to notice some things. I live my life in widening circles that reach out across the world. That image of a leaf, just a drop from a leaf going into a pond and rippling out into widening circles. You know, that I've used that image before. You know, a pebble thrown into a still pond. The great Basho haiku. Uh, Old pond, frog jump in, you know, plop. Just that image. And each one of us, what our lives can be, have a ripple effect. They do have a ripple effect. Doesn't matter if you're the dumbest stone in creation. The way you're living your life is rippling out and affecting everybody. Uh, you know, that's what we're learning. And really this is he wasn't really consciously, he was channeling the concept of ecology, of how we're all connected, what's become known as ecology. I live my life in widening circles that reach out across the world. Now, this is he was Rilke was probably a 5 on the Enneagram, and he was sort of an extreme introvert, a kind of dark, weird character. But his image here is how he lives his life in widening circles that reach out across the world. That's key, because the reason you have a contemplative life is not for yourself. It's to reach out to the world and have some effect on the rest of the world, you see. And then in these next 2 lines of the first stanza, I may not complete this last one, but I give myself to it. I really like that line because there's a sense of vow there. We're just talking about vows. There's a sense of what are you vowing to do? I may not complete this last one. So he's saying going around the circle is life. And you know, who knows at what station, you know, things end, you know, we don't know. It's not important. I may not complete this last one, but I give my life to it. I give myself to it. And when you make a vow that's bigger than you, that starts to change things, you know. Now, in the second sentence, he says, I circle around God, around the primordial tower. One of the things we talked about yesterday was how we're living in a culture with no center. Where is the center? Wall Street probably would be the center of our culture, because every day they tell you whether the Dow Jones is up or down. They don't tell you about a lot of other stuff, but they tell us whether the Dow Jones is up or down. We're living in a market culture. We're living in a entertainment culture. We're living in a transactional culture. Transactions is what puts the market up or down. You see, it doesn't really have a center. A center is always there, and that is the leverage of having a contemplative practice and a contemplative life. No matter at what station you're at, things are falling apart. You're in total darkness and emptiness. And emptiness is a kind of word that can mean space, but it can also mean darkness. It's when the way is lost. So he says, I've been circling for thousands of years. You know, it's just not his journey. He's in this archetypal journey that human beings have been doing for millennia. I've been circling for thousands of years and I still don't know. Am I a falcon, a storm, or a great song. I'll leave you to contemplate why those three images would come out. Very interesting. Very interesting. I once talked about this. I used to have these talks with my father, and when he was in dementia, we'd be sitting on the front porch, and one day the acorns were falling from the oak tree, and I read him this poem a couple of times, and he said, "What a bunch of shit." He said, "This guy doesn't know. He doesn't know his ass from a hole in the ground." That's what he. So we had a really quite an interesting talk. But do you know? A contemplative, you have to be willing not to know, because that is really you're going. You all it's you'll have your shit together. It'll start falling apart, and then you really, when you're in that emptiness place, you freak out because you don't know your ass from a hole in the ground. My father would say, and you have to expect that. You have to know that that's part of this journey. John of the Cross, great mystic, he said, "You the dark light." The dark light, you will hit it if you give yourself to walking this circle. And it's not repetitive, it's not a hamster wheel. If you give yourself to this journey, the circle widens. Contemplatives have, you think of, I mean, I'm here because of Merton. He didn't have any idea, but you're here because of Merton, because I'm here because of Merton. And so, you don't even know the people you're going to affect by just going through these stations. And you even lose, I may not complete this, but I give myself to it this way. I'm going to live a contemplative life. And, but if you don't have a center, you don't have a lover. And you could call it God, you could call it love, you could call it the Tao, you could call it the Buddha nature. But do you have some center? And most people in our culture do not. If it's money, guess what? It ain't there all the time. If it's fame, 15 minutes, it's gone. You see, if it's possessions, the tornado comes in. Yeah, your family pictures 50 miles down, down the way in Kentucky somewhere. They find your pictures. People are returning pictures to people. None of those things are worthy of being in the center. Not power, not profit, not possessions, not the fame. None of those things are a stable center. Yeah, what is? So it's a really provocative poem, and he sort of put in the same idea, but more, because he's saying, I live my life in widening circles, and that's really what happens. And it's not like you notice it happening. You just, if you're committed to living a kind of prayerful, contemplative life with some kind of center, sometimes your center is you just get up in the morning and you sit for a while, and then maybe you sit in the afternoon, maybe you do X, Y, or Z. There's a lot of ways to have a spiritual practice. Sitting is the way I know, and writing. See, so, but this interesting idea, because I don't want to give you some new illusions here about contemplation when you live a contemplative life. It's first of all is a series of losses. And largely they're losses of illusions. So in a minute, when we hit the bell and I stop talking, and we're into the silence, notice what illusions you lose right there, just in the act of contemplation. You lose, if you're paying attention, you lose the illusion that you're in control of anything, because you can't even control your own thoughts. They're coming, they're going, And actually, that's the point. So when you take this step back, when the bell rings, and I'll give you just a few words, and then we'll be in the silence together, on our own, but together. If you can take that step back and just let the thoughts come, let the thoughts go. You're a step back. You've got some space between you and them. It's that space where the lever has to be close to the tree, but not exactly the tree. It has to be something else. So this step back, this little bit of distance, and that could be called the witness. That could be called the mirror of the heart. And so then you're witnessing the thoughts. You're not controlling them. but you're not all wrapped up in it. See, that's really, it's a beautiful place to start to explore. And little by little, someone told me yesterday when they did the thing, they said by the end of the, we sit 4 times, the double and then the teaching and then another double. Uh, by the end of the fourth sit, she felt more relaxed than she had been in a while. Well, how did that happen? Well, a little bit of stepping back. It gives your psyche, it gives your whole being, because when you're caught up in the thoughts, caught up in the world, it's very busy. A little peace and quiet here now. Okay, so we're going to breathe our way into it, and John is going to stop this recording.